Most of the lectures that I'm providing about macroeconomic policy deal with this in an international context with exchange rates, capital mobility, current account deficits, and so forth. But this is all within the broad context of macroeconomic policy. So I want to give a short introduction or reintroduction, hopefully, to some of these broad issues and the general approaches that are often taken to solve some macroeconomic problems. Now, broadly speaking, the most important issues that economists look at the macroeconomic level are trying to maintain high levels of employment or low levels of unemployment, having sustained GDP growth, and also inflation that is under control. Now, to some extent, these may sometimes result in trade-offs among the different policy goals, but we'll talk about that more later. Now, I'm going to be talking about two broad approaches to solving these macroeconomic problems. One is Keynesian approaches. Now, this is actually much more commonly taught in an introductory macroeconomics textbook, which is basically about government policies to stimulate demand to deal with business cycle problems such as unemployment and recessions. But I'm also going to be spending some time on neoclassical approaches, which emphasize flexible prices in the macroeconomy, because many of the issues that can come up in, for example, IMF approaches to economic problems in the developing country, or for that matter, the European approaches to difficulties in Greece in recent years, really have more to do with a neoclassical approach than a Keynesian approach. So I think that will become clear as we go on. So, excuse me, let's first talk about a Keynesian approach, which is in a lot of ways really about the short run, the sort of intermediate and immediate term macroeconomic problems, where the Keynesians focus on aggregate demand policies to get out of a period of low or negative growth, i.e. a recession. Now, embodied in this focus on demand policy is an assumption or a view about the flexibility of prices in the short run. Now, when I talk about flexibility of prices, that would mean not only prices for goods. So if, for example, you were in a recession and there was larger inventories, the prices of those products would fall, and so you would have a reallocation of demand towards the lower prices and maybe get out of a recession. But also, and this is very important, is that wages are a price of hiring labor. And a Keynesian view of things is that that wages can be inflexible in the short run and may make it difficult to deal with problems, say, of high unemployment, because wages do not easily fall and have a self-regulation of the economy. So again, we'll talk about this in more detail. So this has a focus on the demand side. The neoclassical approach generally is about the long run. what policies would be in place in order to have sustained economic growth, not over the next quarter or year, but over the next 10 years, the next 20 years. And this will focus much more on aggregate supply and policies that affect aggregate supply in order to sustain this long-term growth. I actually up here instead of saying flexibility, should have said rigidity of prices of prices in the short run is the Keynesian focus. And the neoclassical approach is going to be looking at outcomes when prices are relatively flexible. And if you have a view that prices can be flexible, then that means that the economy can be more self-regulating. If you have a downturn, the economy can right itself. But importantly, a neoclassical approach to the extent that they have any effect, you push up demand without changing the underlying ability of the economy to produce. A neoclassical approach would say that these Keynesian policies would just be inflationary. Okay, so now these are two sort of diametrically opposed views of macroeconomics. In reality, a lot of macroeconomists, they're not really Keynesian or neoclassical types. They'll tend to say, well, I'm more Keynesian in the short run, I'm more neoclassical in the long run. So don't think of these as being broken up into two opposing camps that never see eye to eye. It's really whether you're thinking about the short run or the long run. Now, a Keynesian approach is to focus on short-term problems, and there's a great quote attributed to John Maynard Keynes, who was the founder, if you will, of Keynesianism, who said, in the long run, we're all dead. Okay, now the idea with that is that if you have policies that are focused only on the long run while there's economic and social misery in the short run, well, let's deal with the problems in front of us. Neoclassical types would differ on that, but that epitomizes the two different approaches. Now, what does this have to do with an international economics course? Really, I'm going to focus especially on this Keynesian part, because what we're going to see is, and this is really the important part, is that there are particular policies that one might pursue that you may have learned about in an introductory macroeconomics course for Keynesian aggregate demand policies, which will be ineffective in an open economy that has flow of goods and services across borders and exchange rates. So an open economy will limit the policies that even a Keynesian would pursue. And we have a separate video about, actually many videos about the constraints that might happen with a Keynesian approach, but the international context matters very much on the Keynesian side. It's also going to matter on the neoclassical side, of ways in which exchange rates and balance of payments can affect the policies that a government might pursue, even in the long run. Okay, so this is a general approach, general overview of the different ways in which economists think about solving these macroeconomic problems. The rest of the videos will be about how to implement those policies in particular contexts in an open economy.